Reading through the Bible in one year, May 4th, Numbers chapter 11, Psalm 48, Isaiah chapter 1, and Hebrews chapter 9. Now the people became like those who complain of calamity in the ears of Yahweh. And Yahweh heard it, and his anger was kindled. And the fire of Yahweh burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. The people therefore cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to Yahweh, and the fire died out. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of Yahweh burned among them. And the rabble who were among them had greedy desires. And also the sons of Israel wept again and said, "Who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we used to eat free in Egypt, and the cucumbers, and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. But now our appetite is dried up, and there is nothing at all to look at except this manna," which again means I don't know what it is. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like that of bdellium. The people would go about and gather it and grind it between two millstones or beat it in the mortar and boil it in the pot and make cakes with it. And its taste was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. And when the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna would fall with it. Now, Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, and each man at the doorway of his tent. The anger of Yahweh was kindled greatly, and it was evil in the sight of Moses. So Moses said to Yahweh, "Why have you allowed this evil toward your slave?" He's like, why are you allowing me to endure this attack from the people? "And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you have laid the burden of all this people on me? Was it I who conceived all this people? Was it I who gave birth to them, that you should say to me, 'Carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing baby, to the land which you swore to their fathers'? Where am I to get meat to give all this people? For they weep before me, saying, 'Give us meat that we may eat.' I alone am not able to carry all this people, because it is too heavy for me. So if you are going to deal thus with me, please kill me at once. If I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness." Yahweh therefore said to Moses, "Gather for me 70 men from the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and their officers, and take them to the tent of meeting, and let them stand there with you. Then I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take of the Spirit who is upon you, and I will put him upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you will not bear it all alone. And say to the people, 'Set yourselves apart as holy tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the ears of Yahweh, saying, "Oh, that someone would give us meat to eat, for it was good for us in Egypt.'" This is an affront to God. They're basically saying, look, we would have been better had we never followed God and just stayed in Egypt. Everything was great for us. You shall eat. Not 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected Yahweh, who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, "Why did we ever go out from Egypt?" But Moses said that the people, among whom I am, are 600,000 on foot. Again, that's just the men. "Or should all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them, to be sufficient for them?" And Yahweh said to Moses, Is Yahweh's power limited? Now you shall see whether my word will happen for you or not. So Moses, now see how this is kind of a similar thing to what happened with the apostles when they were with Jesus. Remember? And the whole crowd of 5,000 people is before them. And that's 5,000 men, not including women and children. And they're standing there, hungry. And Jesus says, "You give them something to eat." They're like, how can we get this much food for them? It's impossible. But God provides. The same type of thing is being shown here. This is a type and shadow of what's to come, showing God's ability to do what he will with whatever he wants, whenever he wants. His sovereign power over all of creation. Verse 24. So Moses went out and told the people the words of Yahweh. And he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and had them stand around the tent. Then Yahweh came down in the cloud and spoke to him. And he took of the Spirit who was upon him and placed him upon the 70 elders. When the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied. But they did not do it again. This is a momentary thing for their ability to prophesy, but it was a sign to the people that these people had a modicum of the Spirit of God within them, so that they could help decide issues within the camp. Then Yahweh came down in the cloud and spoke to him. I already said that. Oh, there we go, verse 26. But 2 men had remained in the camp. One was named Eldad, and the name of the other was Medad. And the Spirit rested on them. Now, they were among those who had been registered, but had not gone out to the tent, and they prophesied in the camp. So a young man ran and told Moses and said, Eldad and Medad or Medad are prophesying in the camp. Basically saying, we need to get rid of these guys. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, the attendant to Moses from his youth, said, Moses, my Lord, restrain them. But Moses said to him, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the people of Yahweh were prophets, that Yahweh would put his Spirit upon them. Then Moses returned to the camp, both he and the elders of Israel. Now there went forth a wind from Yahweh, and it brought quail from the sea, and let them fall beside the camp, about a day's journey on this side, and a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, and about 2 cubits over the surface of the ground, about 36 inches tall. That's how deep it is of these quail. And all the people spent all day and all night and all the next day and gathered the quail. He who gathered at the least gathered 10 homers. And they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. And while the meat was still between their teeth before it was chewed, the anger of Yahweh was kindled against the people. Again, they had said, it would have been better for us had we stayed in Egypt. Basically, it's an affront to God. And Yahweh struck the people with a very severe plague. So the name of that place was called Kiriath Hatava, because there they buried the people who had been greedy. From Kibroth Hatava, the people set out for Hazeroth, and they remained at Hazeroth. Psalm 48 now. Great is Yahweh, and greatly to be praised, in the city of our God, in his holy mountain, beautiful in elevation. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great king. God in her palaces has made himself known as a stronghold. For behold, the kings assembled themselves. They passed by together. They saw it, then they were astonished. They were dismayed and fled in alarm. Panic seized them there, anguish as of a woman in childbirth. With the east wind you break the ships of Tarshish. As we have heard, so we have seen in the city of Yahweh of hosts, in the city of our God. God will establish her forever. Selah. We have thought on your loving kindness, O God, in the midst of your temple. As is your name, O God, so is your praise to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is full of righteousness. Let Mount Zion be glad. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments. Walk about Zion and go around her. Count her towers, count her ramparts, go through her palaces, that you may recount it to the next generation. For this is God, our God, forever and ever. He will guide us over death. That is all the notes to here. And now Isaiah chapter 1. Since we're in a new book, let's go ahead and read the introduction. Isaiah lived during the decline of Israel in the shadow of Assyria. He spoke the word of God to a people who were deaf and blind, who not actually deaf and blind, but they refused to listen to his warnings of looming disaster. He warned that the sin of the people of Judah would bring God's judgment, yet he also declared God is sovereign and would use Cyrus the Persian to return them from exile. This is well before Cyrus was even born. The book speaks of a servant, a man of sorrows, who would be pierced for our transgressions, accomplishing God's purposes of salvation. Isaiah 52:13 through 53:12. These are the lines about the suffering servant who we know as Jesus. The final chapters give a beautiful description of a new creation in which God will rule as king, judging the wicked and establishing eternal peace. Isaiah prophesied about 640 to 700 BC, possibly until the 680s. Let's begin. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Now, why is it Judah and Jerusalem? We're going to get to this later, but the people of Israel enter the promised land. And one generation after they get to the promised land, the people who had actually, they have the battles to claim the land, right, where God defeats the people for them, but they have to fight along with it. It's not synergistic, but it's so they have a sense of ownership, really. And so God defeats the people of the land so that they have basically a place to stay. And God specifically tells them, which we're going to read in the end of Numbers and certainly into Deuteronomy, God says that they have to utterly wipe out these specific people of the land. Not all the people, but the specific people of this land whom God had designated for destruction. But they don't. And 2 generations after they went into the promised land, the people had forgotten the wars to take ownership of that land. And now what they're doing is they're dealing with the fact that these people, just as God said would happen, are starting to pervert their hearts and minds. That's the entirety of the book of Judges. Things go from bad to worse to beyond what you could consider to be worse. It was horrific. Then we have 1st and 2nd Samuel, the birth of the kings of Israel. We get the first king, Saul, the second king, David, and then Solomon. Well, David was told, if your son adheres to the rules of God and doesn't seek after the nations around you, then he will maintain a kingdom forever. But he does not. He marries foreign women and allows them to pervert his mind to idolatry, worship of demons. Then he repents toward the end. But the damage had been done. So God allowed peace during his time, but his son, Rehoboam, is the next ruling king to come after him. And Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, he's super important, we'll get to that later, is designated by God, as told by a prophet, as he's going to be the one to rule over Israel. And the kingdom splits. All the other nations go up to serve Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And Judah retains in Jerusalem by itself. And then you have the northern and the southern kingdoms warring against each other until Israel is taken away into captivity first. The second one to be taken away is Judah, simply because Judah still had a few kings here and there who tried to seek after God. There is not a single king who sought after God the entirety of his life in Israel, less Jehu, who toward the end of his life, he kind of gave up his pursuit of that. So that's why there's the two different kingdoms here. That's why it says that the division of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, concerning Judah and Jerusalem, and not Israel, the entire nation. There are different prophets who spoke to the different areas, the different lands, and they speak differently. Some of these will actually end up going into captivity, and they will speak out against what's happening in Judah. These are the ones who were taken into captivity in Israel. Let's begin. Verse 1. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, concerning Judah and Jerusalem, which he beheld in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Again, this is good King Hezekiah and good King Uzziah. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for Yahweh speaks. Sons I have reared and raised up, but they have transgressed against me. An ox, a dumb animal, knows its owner, and a donkey its master's manger. But Israel does not know, and my people do not perceive. Alas, a sinful nation, a people heavy with iniquity, seed of evildoers, sons who act corruptly. They have forsaken Yahweh. They have spurned the Holy One of Israel. They have become estranged from him. Where will you be stricken again as you continue in your rebellion? The whole head is sick, and the whole heart is faint. From the sole of the foot even to the head, there is nothing sound in it. Only bruises and wounds and raw wounds, not pressed out, not bandaged, not softened with oil. Your land is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Your fields, strangers are devouring them in your presence. It is desolate, as overthrown by strangers. The daughter of Zion is left like a shelter in a vineyard, like a watchman's hut in a cucumber field, like a besieged city. Unless Yahweh of hosts, God of armies, had left us a few survivors, we would be like Sodom. We would be like Gomorrah. Hear the word of Yahweh, you rulers of Sodom. Give ear to the law of our God, you people of Gomorrah. What are your multiplied sacrifices to me? He's not asking, what are they offered to me? He's saying, why do I care? So they keep offering sacrifice upon sacrifice. He's like, why? Says Yahweh. I have had enough of burnt offerings of rams and of the fat of fed cattle. And in the blood of bulls, lambs, or goats, I take no pleasure. They thought that the sacrifices are what they need to do to make God happy with them. But God was more concerned about the attitudes of their hearts. Verse 12, when you come to appear before me, who requires of you this trampling of my courts? Bring your worthless offerings to me no longer. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath, the calling of convocation. I cannot endure wickedness in the solemn assembly. My soul hates your new moon festivals and your appointed times. They have become a burden to me, and I am weary of bearing them. So when you spread out your hands in prayer, I will hide my eyes from you. Indeed, even though you multiply prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, purify yourselves, remove the evil of your deeds from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice, reprove the ruthless, execute justice for the orphan, and plead for the widow, telling them repent. Reveal through your changed heart and mind that you care for me. Come now, let us reason together, says Yahweh. Though your sins are as scarlet, they will be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall be like wool. If you are willing and obey, you will eat the best of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you will be eaten by the sword. For the mouth of Yahweh has spoken. How the faithful city has become a harlot, a whore. She who was full of justice, righteousness once lodged in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross. You drink diluted with water. Your rulers are rebels and companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and pursues rewards. They do not execute justice for the orphan, nor does the widow's plea come before them. Therefore, the Lord, Yahweh of hosts, the mighty one of Israel declares, I will be comforted concerning my adversaries, and I will avenge myself on my enemies. I will also turn my hand against you, and I will smelt away your dross as with lye, and I will remove all your alloy. Then I will have your judges return as at the first, and your counselors as at the beginning. Afterwards you will be called the city of righteousness, a faithful town. Zion will be redeemed with justice, and her repentant ones with righteousness. But transgressors and sinners will be broken together, and those who forsake Yahweh will come to an end. For you will be ashamed of the oaks which you have desired, and you will be humiliated because of the gardens which you have chosen. These are places in which they would perform pagan ceremonies. For you will be like an oak whose leaf withers away, or as a garden that has no water, and the strong man will become tinder, his work also a spark. Thus they shall both burn together, and there will be none to quench them. That is all the notes to here. Let's conclude with Hebrews chapter 9. The author of the book to the Hebrews, or the letter to the Hebrews, continues. Now, even the first covenant had requirements of divine worship and the earthly sanctuary. This is now discussing the differences between the old covenant, which can do nothing to bring salvation, and the new covenant. The first covenant had requirements of divine worship and the earthly sanctuary. For there was a tabernacle prepared, the first part, in which were the lampstand and the table and the sacred bread, which is called the holy place. Remember the tabernacle building itself. He's talking about the fact that there are two rooms in it. The first room is the common room that the priest would go into for every other normal sacrifice. But the Holy of Holies, he only goes into once, Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, to go and bring the blood before God and before the Ark of the Testimony. That's what we speak about here in verse 3. And behind the second veil was a tabernacle which is called the Holy of Holies, having a golden altar of incense, and the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden jar holding the manna, and Aaron's rod which budded, we'll get there eventually, and the tablets of the covenant. These are the things which are inside the Ark of the Covenant. And above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat, of these things we cannot now speak in detail. Now, when these things have been so prepared, the priests are continually entering the first part of the tabernacle, performing the divine worship. Again, they have to do this daily. But into the second, only the high priest enters once a year, not without taking blood, which he offers first for himself and for the sins of the people committed in ignorance. The Holy Spirit is indicating this, that the way into the holy place has not yet been manifested, while the first part of the tabernacle is still standing, which is a symbol for the present time. Accordingly, both gifts and sacrifices are intended. Literally lost my spot. There we go, verse 9. Accordingly, both gifts and sacrifices are offered, which cannot make the worshiper perfect in conscience, since they relate only to food and drink and various washings, requirements of the body imposed until a time of reformation. Not the Reformation. But when the Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things to come, he entered through the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation, and not through the blood of goats and calves, but through his own blood. He entered the holy places once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling those who have been defiled, sanctify for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who, through the eternal Spirit, offered himself without blemish to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? Saying if the blood of these animals and of a dead heifer, right, the ashes of the heifer, they say this is what's used to sanctify the temple, and it's sprinkled on things to bring it, to sanctify it, right, to cleanse it. Saying how much more of the blood of the one who spoke and the universe leapt into existence, the King of all creation, the God of all. How much more when we are sprinkled with his blood? And for this reason, he is the mediator of the new covenant. So that, for the purpose of, since death has taken place for the redemption of the trespasses that were committed under the first covenant, those who have been called may receive the promise of the eternal inheritance. For where a covenant is, there must of necessity be the death of the one who made it. For a covenant is valid only when men are dead, for it is never in force while the one who made it lives. Therefore, not even the first covenant was inaugurated without blood. For when every commandment had been spoken by Moses to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of the calves and of the goats, with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant which God commanded you." Remember this as we read through it in Exodus chapter 24. And in the same way, both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry he sprinkled with blood, or with the blood. And according to the law, one may almost say, all things are cleansed with blood, and without shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Therefore, it was necessary for the copies of the things in the heavens to be cleansed with these. Again, the copies meaning those which are on earth, the tabernacle, the altar, all of the instruments, the sea or basin, as it may be called, or laver, I guess as it's said in this text. In the entirety of the tabernacle and all of the components were sprinkled with blood, right? These on the earth had to be cleansed in the same way, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these, the sacrifice of Jesus the Christ. For Christ did not enter holy places made with hands, mere copies of the true ones, the ones in heaven, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor was it that he would offer himself often, as the high priest enters the holy places year by year with blood that is not his own. Otherwise, he would have needed to suffer often. Jesus would have to be re-sacrificed every single week, as the Catholics do. That's what they believe is transubstantiation, that Jesus is re-sacrificed, that his body becomes physical flesh and physical blood, which is then handed out to the people to actually eat and drink. That's what Catholics believe. Essentially saying that Jesus is re-sacrificed week after week, as is shown here, saying that if that needed to happen, well, then it wasn't complete the first time. Verse 26, we'll read it again. Otherwise, he would have needed to suffer often, since the foundation of the world. But now, once at the consummation of the... Yeah, I was making sure I didn't miss any parts here. But now, once at the consummation of the ages, he has manifested or been revealed to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself, once for all. And inasmuch as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this comes judgment, so Christ also, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time for salvation, without reference to sin, to those who eagerly await him. All right. Again, strongly recommend reading through these notes. They're fantastic. But that is all for today. That's all the reading and the notes. So, God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.